What's going on, everybody? Ab the Audicratic here. Today, we're going to be going over how I use Mimic Creative Sampler to program all of my drums in Reason 14. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, drop a comment below, and you'll also see a pinned comment for you to save a few bucks on your first month of Reason 14. Let's get right into it. Since the release of Reason 14, I've been spending some time working out my templates. I usually have 2 to 3 different templates that I start with on any given session. And in this template, I already have a Mimic Creative Sampler set up to my liking for when I drag and drop my drum sounds. Everything is pretty much good to go. In the sequencer, I have a drum folder already made, and within that folder is the sampler and then the drum bus track. If we double click on the sampler and bring it up in the rack, I can show you exactly how I start. First thing to make sure of is that it's in multi-slot mode, which enables you to load 8 different samples from left to right, which you can trigger independently of one another. Keep in mind that all these settings are saved within the template, so I don't have to do this every time I open the session. The first thing that I do is in the amp section, I make sure that the velocity knob is turned all the way up. If this knob is all the way down, when you go to edit notes, all of the velocities of all the notes will hit the same essentially. So there'll be no difference between one to the other. And the more that you bring this up, there'll be more of a difference when you're changing the volume. I prefer to keep this knob all the way up so I have full control over each individual MIDI note's volume in case I want one note being much lower than the next. Next to that is the gain knob, and I adjust that accordingly. Sometimes drum samples can come in really hot. If that's the case, I just pull back on the gain knob or vice versa. I also make sure that in the amp envelope, the release slider is all the way up for each slot for each sound. This enables it so when I hit a pad, the entire sample will play instead of having to hold the pad the whole time. There are times where I bring this all the way down in case I want to have a lot more control over my notes in the sequencer. This is all track dependent, depends on exactly what I'm doing at any given time. But I always keep this up to begin with when I'm first messing around with drums. It just makes it a little bit easier for me to create. So to recap, the velocity knob is all the way up on each slot, and the release is also all the way up in the amp envelope on each slot. So you can see slot 1 goes into this first mixer channel, which I named Kick, which is always going to be in slot 1. And the insert effects in not only this, but all the mixer channels, I have an F6 from Waves, and then I have it going into a transient shaper. And this is the same for every mix channel. So I have my snare, hat, open hat, a pre-kick. The bottom 3 I have numbered just 0, 00, and 000. That's all dependent on what type of sound that I end up putting in there. Could be different track to track. I almost never control the mixer channels within the rack. I'll just pull up the mixer if I need to do that by hitting F5, and I can pull it up right here, control all my sounds if I need to. But you can also do that in the track panel as well. And there's a new way to do that depending on how you route everything. So in this case, if you're routing everything from each slot to its own mixer channel, you see numbers under Mimic, and that reflects each output that you have for each sound. And underneath that, you'll see the corresponding insert effects. In this case, they're all the same on each one, for now at least. If I add more, you'll see it pop up here under each output. And once all that's set, I bring up the mixer, and you can see that all the sounds are routed to its own drum bus, which in Reason 14 is going to give it its own rack. When you select rack per track in the options window, I have that on for default, any track that I am opening. When you first create a bus, it will not show up in the sequencer like this. So I'm going to actually just delete this out just by clicking delete tracks. If I bring up the mixer, it's still going to be there. And a way to allow it to show in the sequencer, just click the sequencer button and it'll pop up right here. And this shows up in the drum folder that I have. So I have Mimic and then the bus within the folder. So if I ever automate anything in the bus, it'll show up on the sequencer. And when I pull the drum bus up in its own rack, this is where I would add any effects, any processing, distortion, etc. I've loaded a few drum samples in, and I need to make a few adjustments before I even start arranging, and I'll show you how I do that. The one thing I want to make sure of before I go forward is to make sure the kick is at the level I want it, and I adjust everything around the kick. There's a couple ways you can do this. It's just really looking at a meter, in my opinion, to get an absolute value of what you're doing. I use a VU meter. I use the one from Waves, and I can adjust everything around that. And what I do is I'll open it, and then I can keep it open. I'll keep that up here for now. I will cancel out of the drum bus, and then click open the drums again. It's coming in a little hot, not too bad, but I always want to make sure it's not slamming the VU meter because I'm going to end up sending this through a lot more processing more times than none. So what I do is sometimes I'll bring the gain all the way down and then kind of start hitting. Even if it hits the 3 in this case, as long as it's just tapping it, that's enough for me. That snare is very loud, so I'm going to pull that snare way back. Might even turn the kick back up just a tad. So that sounds pretty good thus far. It's a hi-hat. Let me bring that down a little bit. Sounds good. Open hat's definitely loud. And then I have my pre-kick. That's also very loud. I call it the pre-kick for the kick that comes in before the main kick, if that makes any sense. I like to shorten the length of these because I don't want it to overlap when the main kick hits. Sounds pretty good. I try to stay away from this next step until I'm programming the drums, but for the sake of the tutorial, sometimes what I'll do is I really like the F6 from Waves. And sometimes I'll just take a look and, if I'm not hearing something off the bat, but if I do see something visually, and I know it's a good idea to really be mixing with your ears, but I'm a fan of looking at the EQ sometimes just to get an idea in case I'm too in love with the way the kick sounds, but something just isn't right ultimately. So I can see that it's pretty hot at 125, not the end of the world, but even for now, I'm just going to pull that down just a tad. Nothing crazy. Even over here, it's a little hot around hold on, where are we at? Like 350. It just gives a little bit of a smooth. I try not to go too crazy because once you start doing too much, the drum beat will sound way too thin. And I've been getting better with actually holding off on this until I'm really programming. But for the sake of this, a little bit of EQ sometimes goes a long way in the beginning. The snare was also sounding a bit hot. You can see the fundamental frequency of the snare, 217. So I like to roll a lot of that off in the bottom. It's just not necessary. While I do like the way it sounds in general, it's a little too hot in this area here, 4K. My personal choice to do this is I take advantage of the dynamic controls with this and I'll pull the threshold back. I usually leave the attack and release around here. Sometimes if I want it to hit really quick, I'll pull the attack down. And then the range knob is essentially like the ratio of how far down you're getting compression. It's a little hot without it. Kind of want to spread the Q out a little bit. I think that sounds good. I do like this hat. It's a little bit sharp in the AK range. So for this, since it's such a short note, I'm not going to really use any type of dynamic controls on this. I'm just going to pull this down a little bit and I'm going to shorten the Q on this. So I can see it's hitting hot here. Another thing to keep in mind is your gain staging. I'm always trying to make sure the gain is right from Mimic first, but even after I'm messing with some of the sounds, if I notice it's still a little bit too hot, I'll just pull it back within the plugin itself. One thing I'm noticing with the snare before I even start programming is it's a little too snappy. So I'm going to pull the attack down on the transient shaper. If I go to the pre-kick, don't like how much high end it has. So I'm going to roll a lot of that off. I think that sounds good. Now, before I add any bus processing, I'm going to do a little bit of programming. And I just made a quick loop. And now we're going to go to the drum bus. So if you double click in the sequencer to bring up the bus, I'm going to get rid of this VU meter because I do not need it anymore. As of late, the plugin I like to add first is the bus clipper from Slate Digital to just control some of those peaks. And then I'm almost always adding a virtual mix rack. There's endless possibilities here. The VCC channel, I like putting it on the Brit N and just kind of cranking it. Let's add an FG stress. Also love this. I'm a fan of leaving this on the default setting and just kind of dialing back the mix knob for my drums. Now off the bat, I can already hear that the snare is coming in a little too hot. So what I like to do is I like to go back here and kind of pull it back from the gain. Really the same thing with the hat too. The hat is coming in a little too hot, both the hats. And this can happen. So if you find yourself adding effects on the bus and things are just sounding much louder than you want them to be, sometimes you just got to go back and turn it down behind you. And sometimes I'll do this. I'll just keep going back little by little. And as I'm adding bus processing, things are just kind of getting out of whack, especially the hats. And there might also be times where you're not really adding much to the bus at all. Sometimes you might not add anything to the bus. I tend to do it because I like the way it brings everything together, but it's really taste at the end of the day. So keep that in mind. So we have a drum loop. It's sounding pretty good. There's effects on the individual tracks. There's effects on the bus. Now what? Now, normally I'd probably go on to more sounds, but to go a little bit deeper into the drum bus, maybe I want to bounce this down to audio and not work with the MIDI anymore, which sometimes I want to do. If you right click on the clip in the sequencer and then go down to bounce in place, what that will do is it'll bounce out each line of notes that you have into its own channel. So if I go and zoom in on the waveform a little bit, the way it bounces in terms of the order of the tracks is a little odd. I'm not quite sure the logic behind it, but you can see my kick track. There's the hat track, open hat, snare. And on those zero tracks, like I said before, I don't have anything within those channels. So I would just delete, delete, delete first. Really just start dragging stuff around and then rename the tracks themselves, the audio tracks that I got from the bounce. So I have my main kick, then the pre-kick, then the snare, then the hi-hat, then the open hat. This is where it gets a little tricky, and I'll try to break this down the best I can. If you have all of your outputs going to individual mixer channels from Mimic, if you click on the clip in the sequencer that has all the sounds arranged and you bounce to audio, it's going to give you new tracks as new audio tracks. So they're going to be completely separate from the mix channels that you got under Mimic. So when you pull up the mixer from left to right, you're going to see the mix channels that were under Mimic, and then the rest on the right are going to be the new audio tracks that they made, and they're all going to route to the drum bus. So when you're pretty much done using your MIDI notes to create your sequence and you don't need it for now, maybe you want to go back to it later, this is what I would suggest doing. I would take the Mimic out of the folder and you could just minimize it. And really you can move all of these notes way out of the way because you don't really need them anymore if you're working with audio. Let's just say I don't need them and I'm going to move them all the way down here. And the reason I want to keep that chunk of MIDI notes is, let's say I want to go back and reprogram what I did in a different way, and I don't want to do that with the audio notes. I could always pull back up the Mimic and do it that way. But if I want to just stay in audio, I can do that right now as well. And another big point to know is that these are still getting bussed to the drum bus. This is very important because when you bounce out the tracks from the mix channels that are underneath the Mimic in this case, it's only going to bounce out with the effects that were on each individual track. It will not bounce out the processing that was sent to a bus. So anything I had on the EQ on the kick, or if I had the transient shaper on, that's going to print to the audio. And now all of this audio is still going to the drum bus. To the best of my knowledge, within reason, whenever you're routing tracks to a bus, if you're ever bouncing within that track, it will not print the effects on the drum bus, or any bus for that matter, if it's routed that way through the mixer. Very important to keep in mind. But what this does do is it frees up some DSP from the Mimic, the effects within the channels, and now I just have the new audio channels and the effects in the drum bus. This can add up over time, so anytime you can save yourself some trouble by essentially printing the audio, I would do that. So to kind of recap where we're at, I have my drum folder, I have all my drum sounds as printed audio files, and they're all getting bussed to the drum bus with the effects here. And I still have Mimic within the sampler in case I want to go back, make some adjustments, and re-edit the MIDI sequence that I have. Hopefully I won't need to do that, and I can just work straight in audio from this point forward. Let's say you want to make chops at the beginning of all the transients of all the sounds. In this case, the kick. So let's double click on the kick to open it up in the edit area. Go to slice edit on the bottom left, and it's going to create slices at each transient. You can click split at all slices, and now each sound is split at the transient. So I just went through and shortened all the notes so there's not a lot of extra dead space with the waveform in case I want to move some stuff around. Let's listen to the beat again. Once you chop all the drums this way, or any type of audio within a folder, if you look at the clips within the folder panel, so if you don't want it that way and you want to be able to just drag everything over as one, so what I've been doing is I'll just add an audio track with nothing on there and then just draw a clip in the sequencer, which will combine all of the tiny folder clips that it was giving me into this one here, and then I can move it. In case I want to cut some up, I can do it that way and then move whatever's in the cuts. So a few workarounds in case you do really like to work in the folder feature. When you cut up all the audio, it is going to screw everything up, but just drawing something in a blank audio track will bring that back. You might not need to use it in that way, but in case you do, that's one way to do it. And that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for joining me. I really love using Mimic to program my drums. I don't always bounce out to audio like you saw at the end. Sometimes I kind of stay within the MIDI pretty much the whole track before I'm tracking out to another program like Pro Tools, or if somebody needs the beat stemmed out. So I wanted to hit on all the steps that I might encounter while making drums on a track. I don't always hit all of the steps. I do tend to hit a lot of them, but for the sake of the tutorial, I thought it was good to end it there. Let me know what you think. Drop a comment below. Again, check the pinned comment if you're interested in trying out Reason 14, the monthly subscription. You'll get 20% off your first month in the comment pinned to the video. Thanks again for checking out the video. I'm Ab the Audicrat. Peace.